Morning, Paul. Thanks for sharing about the bigger barns, because that's one of the examples I was going to talk about today. So today, I wanted to talk about the topic of war. It's a serious topic. I think a lot of us who hear the news, we know there's a lot of wars happening in the world right now, like, very serious wars. Like in Israel, there's wars going on right in that area, like horrific things happening. In, Russia, Ukraine, there's wars happening. And not only that, but in many other spots of the world. It's hard for us, if we're living here, to picture what that's like. But, people who live there, they're under threat of death daily. Like there's bombs and airplanes and missiles and guns and just all kinds of stuff. And you could wake up in the morning and not even know if you're going to survive the day. Like, it's a serious thing. And the people who are there, like, it would have to be super scary. We can't really picture that as easily here if we've never been through that here in Abbotsford, right? Like, it's here, it's summertime, people are camping, we're swimming. Young people are, finishing up school, thinking about careers and all that stuff. And there's nothing wrong with any of that stuff. But there's one key Bible truth I wanted to talk about today, was on my heart. That the fact is, we are in a state of war right here and now. It's spiritual warfare, and it does not look the same as a real war that's happening elsewhere in the world. But the stakes, I would say, are much higher than that. What we have happening in the war today is, on the one side, we've got the world, and its pull to us, to worldliness. We've got our flesh, which wants us to go after sinful desires, and we have the devil on that side. On the other side, we have God, His Spirit, and our spirit wanting us to go the other way. And what's stuck right in the middle is ourself, our soul. Like, what are we going to do? Are we going to be drawn after the world? Are we going to be drawn after our flesh? Are we going to be drawn after temptations from the devil and become worldly? Or are we going to be going after the Lord and being led by the Spirit so we can be changed into His image? So I thought today it would be good to read a few verses that helped us get a reminder that we are living in a war today. And it's very, very serious. And it's good for us to remember those things, because it'll help us to be alert and ready. So what I was going to look at briefly was just some verses to show us that we are living in a state of war. I wanted to talk a little bit about the wiles of the devil and what he does in this war. And finally, how the Lord expects us to walk where we're at. So let's start off in Revelation chapter 12. So I'm going to read a few verses that are going to show us that we are indeed living in a state of war. So Revelation chapter 12. Yeah. And I'm just going to read initially here the first 5 verses. It says, "A great sign appeared in heaven, a woman clothed with the sun and moon under her feet, and on her head a crown of thorns, of 12 stars. She was with child, and she cried out, being in labor and in pain to give birth. Then another sign appeared in heaven, and behold, a great red dragon, having 7 heads and 10 horns. And on its heads were 7 diadems, and its tail swept away 1/3 of the stars of heaven and threw them to the earth. The dragon stood before the woman who was about to give birth, so that when she gave birth, he might devour her child. When she gave birth to a son, a male child, who would rule all the nations with a rod of iron, and her child was caught up to God and to His throne." So what we see here at the beginning is we see Satan, and a lot of us will remember that he actually took 1/3 of the angels with him when he rebelled against God, and we see that happening. And we see his desire to destroy this child, but who the Lord protected. So if we skip down to verse 13, it says, "When the dragon saw that he was thrown down to the earth, he persecuted the woman who had given birth to the male child. But the 2 wings of the great eagle was given to the woman, so she might fly into the wilderness to her place, where she was nourished for a time, times, and half a time, from the presence of the serpent. And the serpent poured out water like a river out of his mouth after the woman, so that he might cause her to be swept away with the flood. But the earth helped the woman, and the earth opened its mouth and drank up the river which the dragon poured out of its mouth." And here's the key verse 17, that I wanted to kind of get from this point. Verse 17, it says, "The dragon was enraged with the woman and went off to make war with the rest of her children who keep the commandments of God and hold to the testimony of Jesus. So what we see here in verse 17, I want us to not lose sight of this. The present state of the dragon, he is enraged at the woman, and his present situation is to make war with the rest of her children, which is all true believers. That's what the dragon is after. I'm going to read 2 more examples to show also, to confirm that's true. So let's look at Colossians chapter 2. Actually, Colossians chapter 1. So not only is the dragon angry at the woman and wants to make war against her children, he's angry against Christ. He also, I'm going to share a few more things about why he's in this state. And for us, who are born-again believers, there's a couple of amazing things that have happened for us to be born again. So if we look at verse 13 in Colossians 1, it says, "He rescued us from the domain of darkness and transferred us to the kingdom of his beloved Son, in whom we have redemption, the forgiveness of sins." So when we repent, that means not just being sorry for our sins, but we actually turn from our sins. And when we believe in Jesus, we're born again. But when we're born again, it says here a remarkable thing happens. It says Christ pulls us out of the domain of darkness that's owned by the enemy, by the devil, and he transferred us to his kingdom. So he rescues us. And you have to say to yourself, is the king of the domain of darkness, would he be happy about that? And the answer is no. That's another thing that gets him enraged. The fact that Jesus takes us from his domain and saves us and pulls us out into his own kingdom. So that's another verse to show that. And I'm going to give one more example on that if we go to Luke chapter 11. So in Luke chapter 11, Jesus here is giving an example. And he says in verse 21, "When a strong man, fully armed, guards his own house, his possessions are undisturbed." And the strong man, of course, here is talking about the devil. He's guarding he's guarding his domain, he's guarding his kingdom, and he's guarding all his own slaves who are part of that kingdom. That's the devil. And it says in verse 22 in Luke 11, "But when someone stronger than him attacks him and overpowers him, he takes away from him all his armor on which he has relied and distributes his plunder." So to me, that's another really cool verse about what the Lord has done. The Lord has actually overpowered the devil. He's taken us believers out of his kingdom and put us into his own kingdom. And those facts, the devil is enraged at Christians now, and what he's doing is he's living in a state of active warfare against us. And what I wanted to do is I wanted to talk about some of the wiles of the enemy so we can be prepared. So I'm just going to read a verse from 1 Peter chapter 5. It says in verse 8, "Be of sober spirit, be on the alert. Your adversary, the devil, prowls around like a roaring lion, seeking someone to devour." So our enemy, the devil, he's out there trying to destroy us. And he's also known as the father of lies. And if the Bible tells us that he's trying to destroy us and he's like a roaring lion, if he's the father of lies, what would he actually be saying? He'd be saying, you don't have to worry, there's no devil. I'm not going to destroy you. There's no danger. You don't need to be alert. You can be complacent. Like all those things he'd be telling us. And if we look outwardly at our society here in Abbotsford, it's very easy, like I've been sensing lately, to get into a state where we're not realizing that the enemy's out there trying to destroy us. Like, we just look at life. It goes on day by day. We see, we grow up, we start working, all these different things happen in life, and sometimes it's easy to forget that the enemy's out there. He's enraged at us, and he's actively trying to destroy us. So just wanted to give a couple more examples about that. The purpose of the enemy is to steal, kill, and destroy. The devil wants to draw us toward worldliness. He wants us to go after fleshly desires and sin. And he wants us to forget that there's a war for our very souls happening behind the scenes. He wants us to forget that and realize it's just day-to-day life. So what I wanted to do is look at a couple examples of 2 different people in the Bible that kind of, you could say, forgot this and what happened to them. So we're going to start off with the example Paul shared from Luke chapter 12. This was the guy who built the barns. Luke chapter 12. And starting in verse 16. So thanks for sharing that, Paul. It's a good intro. So Luke chapter 12, verse 16, Jesus told him a parable and said, "The land of a rich man was very productive. He began reasoning to himself and said, 'What should I do since I have no place to store my crops?' And then he said, 'This is what I will do. I will tear down my barns and I'll build larger ones, and I'll store all my grain and all my goods. And I'll say to my soul, Soul, you have many goods laid up for many years to come. Come, take your ease, eat, drink, and be merry.' But God said to him, 'You fool, this very night your soul is required of you, and who will now own what you have prepared? So is the man who stores up treasure for himself and is not rich toward God.'" So if we look at verse 19 and we're thinking about this man here, he says to himself, "Soul, I have lots of stuff laid up for myself for many years to come. Take my ease, eat, drink, and be merry." If this man was aware that he was in a state of war, would he have said that? There's no way he could have said that. If he realized that the enemy was out there trying to destroy him, the enemy is sneakily trying to figure out how he can get this man. The man wouldn't have said, "Oh, I can take it easy, I can relax, I don't have to worry." The man would have. He was not on the alert. So what happened is, the Lord said to him, "This very night your soul is required of you," and everything he had, he lost. So that's one example that we need. We are in an urgent life and death war. We need to be alert. We need to be on guard, and we can't let ourselves get into this situation we see here in Luke chapter 12. So one more example, and you don't have to turn to it, but I'll just quickly read a couple of verses from 2 Samuel chapter 11. So this is related to King David's life. So 2 Samuel chapter 11, verse 1, it says, "It happened in the springtime, at a time when the kings go out to battle, that David sent Joab and the servants with him and all Israel. And then they destroyed the sons of Ammon and besieged Rabbah. But David stayed behind at Jerusalem. And when evening came, David got out of his bed and walked around the roof of the king's house, and there he saw a woman bathing, and she was very beautiful in appearance." So it's very interesting in this section. It says this was a time when kings normally go to war. But what did David do? Did he go out to war? Was he being prepared for war? David stayed home. He wasn't prepared for war. And not only that, it says, but David stayed home. And then, of course, at that point, he fell into temptation. And the sin he fell into affected the course of his whole life. It was a big deal. So that was another example I saw, that we are in a state of warfare. And the enemy wants to destroy us. He also can do it little by little. A little compromise here or a little worldliness there. You know, we often hear excuses, "Hey, everyone does it." But I just want to urge myself, us adults, even young people, we need to do everything to the glory of God. We need to live to the glory of God. So finally, I wanted to look a little bit in Ephesians, knowing that we're in a state of war and knowing the enemy's out there trying to destroy us. How does God want us to walk? So I just thought we'd look at a few verses from Ephesians 4-6. And in Ephesians, the first 3 chapters of Ephesians are often, they talk about what God has done for us. But the last 3 chapters in Ephesians are talking about how he wants us to walk. And I found 6 examples in these chapters talking about how God expects us to walk. So I thought I'd just look at these few examples. How does God want us to walk? And just to kind of close off here. So let's start off in Ephesians chapter 4. So in verse 1, Paul says, "I, the prisoner of the Lord, implore you to walk in a manner worthy of the calling to which you have been called, with all humility and gentleness, with patience, showing tolerance for one another in love." So Paul is imploring them, and the word implore means to beg. He's begging them to walk in a manner worthy of the calling to which we have been called. Jesus said, "Be perfect as I am perfect." And the Lord wants us to follow him wholeheartedly. It says in Romans 12, verse 11, "Not lagging behind in diligence, but fervently in spirit serving the Lord." The Lord wants us to be fervent, means like boiling, like wholeheartedly, with all our heart, serving the Lord. That's how he wants us to walk. Let's look at 4:17. So Ephesians 4, verse 17 So again, this is another example of how he wants us to walk. And Paul says, "So this I say and affirm together with the Lord, that you walk no longer as the Gentiles walked, in the futility of their mind, being darkened in their understanding, excluded from the life of God because of the ignorance that is in them, because of the hardness of their heart. And they, having become callous, they have given themselves over to sensuality for the practice of every kind of impurity with greediness." So here we're told in verse 17 not to walk the way the world walks. Their minds are darkened, and what it says in verse 19 is they've become callous. To me, that becomes like if you're doing the same motion with your hand all the time in construction, like I think, Jacob, you work in construction, and if you're working with your hands over and over and over again, the same thing, your hand is going to get some roughage, some calluses. And then if it's like that, you're not going to feel things quite as sensitive as you used to. So I think that word, when it says become calloused, I think it means becoming desensitized to the things of God. And the Lord does not want us to go down that path. What we need to do is we need to avoid the stuff in our life that can pollute us so we don't become desensitized to it. So I think verses 17 to 19 here is talking about that. The example is not to walk the way the world walks, not to walk after that way, because they became desensitized to sin, and then they gave themselves over to every kind of sin. So let's look at verse 29 in chapter 4. It says, "Let no unwholesome word come out of your mouth, but only such a word as is good for edification, according to the need of the moment, so it'll give grace to those who hear." So this is an example of speech. And the Lord wants our mouth to produce things that build people up, that edify. And so that's something I want to do as I walk with God. I want to edify each other and not let things come out of my mouth that shouldn't. And then let's look at chapter 5, verse 2. It says, "Walk in love, just as Christ also loved you, and he gave himself up for us, an offering and a sacrifice to God." And then verse 3 says, "But immorality and impurity and greed must not even be named among you, as is proper among saints. And there must be no filthiness or silly talk or coarse jesting, which is not fitting, but rather giving of thanks." So here we see in our walk, we need to walk in love. We need to walk in God's love, and we need to seek to love one another. And then we also see in verse 3 and 4, it's also referring to, avoiding immorality, and then how we talk, no silly talk nor coarse jesting, but rather giving of thanks. So how we talk is important. And then if we look at verse 8 of chapter 5, he says, "You formerly were darkness, but now you are light in the Lord. Walk as children of light." So when I thought about that, what does it mean to walk as children of light? I think it means walking in the light. If there's any dark spots in our life that we look inside and we say, "Hey, this isn't right, this isn't honoring to God," we need to repent of it, we need to turn from it, and we need to come to the light and walk in the light. So walking as children of light, that's what we should be doing. The Lord knows everything inside us through and through, and we need to say, "Lord, if there's anything in my life that doesn't please you, I want to bring it to the light and turn from it and follow after you with all my heart." And then if you look at verse 15 of chapter 5, he says, "Be careful how you walk, not as unwise men, but as wise." The Lord wants us to walk carefully. He wants us to walk carefully, not as unwise, but as wise. Carefully considering certain things in our life, saying, "Hey, is this thing going to lead me to the world, or is this thing going to lead me to God?" We shouldn't be foolish and just going through life quickly, but we should be carefully examining things in our life and saying, "Hey, does this benefit us, or does it hurt us? Does this benefit others, or does it hurt others?" So the Lord wants us to be careful how we walk. So that was verse 15. And finally, let's go to chapter 6. Verse 18, it says, "With all prayer and petition, pray at all times in the Spirit, and with this in mind, be on the alert with all perseverance and petition for all the saints." So the Lord wants us to be praying, pray all the time, pray about everything. We should come to the Lord and we should pour out our heart before Him. We should pray that we can know the right way to walk. We can pray, "Lord, help me be alert to see things that could be a stumbling block in front of me." We need to pray. We need to be on the alert, like it says, because the devil is out to destroy us. So what I want to do is just finish off with one verse in 1 Peter. 1 Peter chapter 4, verse 1. So when we're in a battle, when we're in a war, we need a weapon. And most people would remember the sword of the Spirit is the Word of God from Ephesians 6, but here I'm going to talk about a different weapon that is also good to remember. So 1 Peter chapter 4, it says, "Since Christ also suffered in the flesh, arm yourself also with the same purpose." So when it says arm yourself, it's almost like a weapon we need to take up. Arm yourself with the same purpose, because he who has suffered in the flesh has ceased from sin, so as to live the rest of time in the flesh, no longer for the lusts of men, but for the will of God. So we need to arm ourselves with that purpose. Lord, as I live the rest of my days in earth here, I don't want to live for the lusts of men, but I want to live for the will of God. We need to arm ourselves with that purpose. And as we do that, the Lord is going to help protect us from the enemy. So to summarize, we're in an active battle. The enemy is seeking to destroy us. He's seeking to lead us after worldliness and after sin. And the Lord wants us to walk after him, walking carefully, and he wants us to be in prayer and arming ourselves to no longer live for men. That's it. Thank you.